Thank you. Those three statements are so referred to the relevant committees. Senator Cherargei, what's your statement?
Mr. Speaker, I wanted to comment on the last statement.
What is your statement, Senator?
Oh, okay.
Make your request for statement.
Okay. Request for statement, Mr. Speaker, on the planned importation of maize by the ministry, on the planned importation of duty-free maize, 10 million bucks by the Minister of Agriculture and Livestock Development. Mr. Speaker, sir, I raise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries on the planned importation of 10 million bags of duty-free maize by the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Development, and also Ministry of Trade. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain what informed the decision by the Ministry of Agriculture and Trade, Livestock Development to import maize, and yet the National Cereals and Produce Board has not opened its stores to take up the crop currently being harvested by local farmers across the country, considering the high cost of farm inputs, where one bag of fertilizer was 7,000 shillings, they incurred, among other costs, during the planting season. Mr. Speaker, sir, number 2, appraise the Senate on the status of the government subsidized fertilizer in terms of uptake by farmers so far and the amount of fertilizer currently available in stores countrywide, and indicate the steps the government is taking to enhance uptake and ensure local farmers produce sufficient maize and obviate the need for importation of maize outside the country. And Mr. Speaker, finally, recommend that the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, Investment and Industry does not gazette the notice allowing duty-free maize importation from outside the country until the entire crop being harvested currently is purchased by National Cereals and Produce Board, local millers, and National Strategic Grain Reserve. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for that indulgence.
The Honorable Senator Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to thank the Senator of Nandi, Senator Cherargei, for a statement on the maize importation. Mr. Speaker, it is sad that we are back to the same circle that we were in 3 years ago when I and the current Speaker of the National Assembly had to investigate the very same thing of importation of maize when maize was being harvested. Mr. Speaker, luckily, God has saved us the productivity in the grain growing zone this time again, and there's pamba harvest in Trans Nzoia, there's pamba harvest in Bungoma, there's pamba harvest in Nandi, there's pamba harvest in Uasin Gishu, and Elgeyo Marakwet, the islands of Elgeyo Marakwet. So you ask yourself the big question, the harvesting is going on right now. In fact, we find a lot of lorries now ferrying maize from Uasin Gishu to other places. So you ask yourself, what really informed the decision to import maize now? Because yes, the maize may not be enough because most parts of the country were dry. We did not get as much as we would have gotten under normal circumstances in Meru and wherever. So, Mr. Speaker, as I support this statement, we would really like the committee to also relook at the report that we developed after our investigation of maize. Because what we realized at that time is that some of the approvals were overshot by more than double. An approval is given by the cabinet for importation of maize to a certain tune, and we discovered they had imported more than double. So even as they question that, they need to look at the report that came from our earlier report, because it was a report of this House, so that we make sure that we don't suffer double jeopardy. But, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that the harvest in North Rift is very good, and we should not, in fact, be having problems. Yesterday only, we talked to the Minister for Education, and we said, you have enough maize not to have children at home, because children from Kajiado, children from northern Kenya are at home, basically because there is no food. So it is good that as a House, we really put our foot down. The other thing we really need to look at is how is the role of the governors in this, because agriculture is devolved except for policy. What are the governors doing? Why are we not seeing governors frantically looking for food in some of these areas? So even as we are questioning the importation, we really need to start questioning the distribution of food in this country, from the growing zone to the consumption zones, because the country will continue to be like that for a very long time, especially with climate change setting in and having problems. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I stand with the statement of Senator Cherargei. We cannot afford to import maize at a time when harvesting is taking place. They can do importation any other time when we know we don't have. But now that we have, I would like to urge the Minister for Trade to avoid mixing things and allow the Ministry of Agriculture to open the depots first, so that farmers can release their maize before any importation is done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mandago.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by Senator Cherargei, the Senator for Nandi, on the issue of importation of maize, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the Cabinet Secretary for Trade has been misled by cartels who have existed in this country for a while, Mr. Speaker, that farmers in maize-producing counties, Mr. Speaker, are hoarding maize at the expense of Kenyans who are suffering from hunger, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the farmers are not hoarding maize. In fact, we are in a season of harvesting, Mr. Speaker, and as the maize is being harvested, it is being sold to traders who are distributing across the country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, there are traders from Kitui, there are traders from Isiolo, there are traders from Marsabit and Samburu buying maize to take to those famine-stricken counties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the importation of maize that is sanctioned during harvest, Mr. Speaker, is meant to impoverish the farmers who have already suffered major losses, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet Secretary must be reminded that the situation we are facing of low productivity is as a result of bad politics, Mr. Speaker, in the agriculture sector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we may recall, the farmers in this country were not given any subsidized fertilizer, Mr. Speaker, to enable them produce food at an affordable cost, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, therefore, it cannot be expected that the farmers are going to sell their produce at a lower price when the cost of production, Mr. Speaker, was very high. Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate it's meant to incite the farmers against other citizens of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that importation must be stopped or deferred until the maize in the country, Mr. Speaker, is mopped up. Mr. Speaker, I don't understand the rationale of importation of maize. I've checked the prices globally, Mr. Speaker, and even the so-called GMO maize, Mr. Speaker, will land in Mombasa at a cost of 5,200 by a 90 kg bag of maize. If you add the logistical support required to transport that maize and avail in the areas that is required, Mr. Speaker, the price will go to 5,800. Mr. Speaker, our farmers would be very happy in this country if the National Cereals and Produce Board even opened those stores at a cost of 5,500 per bag, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you farmers will be ready to deliver their maize. In any case, the farm price, the farm gate price we are selling our maize now, Mr. Speaker, is between 4,800 to 5,300, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, there is need to support farmers in this country. Worldwide, Mr. Speaker, farmers are given subsidies to produce because farming in itself cannot be profitable and affordable, and the cost of food cannot be affordable without giving subsidies to the farmers. Mr. Speaker, I would also like the committee to find out what happened with the strategic food reserves that we used to have in this country? Who changed the policy from storing food in the stores to keeping money in the accounts, Mr. Speaker? And that is why we found ourselves in a sorry situation, because all the NCBB stores are empty, because a bad policy was put in place that has messed up the strategic food reserves in this country. And that is why government cannot effectively and efficiently respond when we have issues within a number of counties. And Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that in more than 36 counties in this country, we have NCBB stores, Mr. Speaker. If you visit those stores today, Mr. Speaker, those stores are empty. And we are not saying the strategic food reserves that should be kept in this country is only maize, Mr. Speaker. What is happening with the rice from where, Mr. Speaker, that is supposed to be part of the strategic food reserves? Where is the rice going, Mr. Speaker? Where is the maize going, Mr. Speaker? Where is the sorghum that was being grown in the semi-arid counties, Mr. Speaker, being sold at? We need to revert and go back to storing food for emergency situations in this country. We cannot keep money in account or give money to organizations like Kenya National Trading Corporation to keep money to buy food when we have a situation like this. Suppose we don't find the food in the market, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, countries all over the world are now using technology to monitor their food situation, to monitor the weather patterns. Suppose the weather patterns globally cannot allow for food production. The countries we are expecting to import the food from, Mr. Speaker, can also keep the food for their own citizens, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, it is in the interest of this country that we keep our own strategic food reserves in the stores that have been built and were purposely meant for that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I therefore rise to support this statement, and the committee should consider asking the Cabinet Secretary to defer importation of maize until all the maize produced locally in this country have been mopped up and sold. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, they should, as a pledge of this government, Mr. Speaker, going into the future and beginning in the next production cycle, Mr. Speaker, provide a guaranteed minimum return for the maize farmer, so that as farmers, we can determine whether we are going to go back to the farms to do maize, to do food for this country, or decide whether we are going to do other commercial production, Mr. Speaker, so that we also, as farmers, are also able to meet our subsistence needs, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, food production or maize production should not be taken as a hobby, Mr. Speaker. We do maize production as a business. That is where we get our school fees. That is where we get our money to go to hospitals. And we therefore don't want to be impoverished by business people who want to take advantage